more about that stick, Michael. I sure would like to hear more about that stick.
Chief Chirpa was so cool. I got him at Zayre's with my brother, and my brother got one too. But
you had two Chief Chirpas?
Yeah, his head dress was more rubbery than my Chief Chirpa's head dress, which was more rigid, and that's how we told them apart. There's
nothing quite like a rigid headdress. I'm here to tell you.
It's called a helmet.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying that that's what a lot of toy discussions tend to devolve into is, remembering specific waves. And
Remember
stuff
that
like
time?
Remember that time? Remember? Yeah.
I remember.
Hey, remember that time you wore that jacket to work? Oh, I'm so stupid. Stupid.
Every single thing we do with RetroBlasting or Dreamland, I put it against the Chris Farley test.
I do too.
Like, if it's just, remember that time? That was so cool. Like, if it's just that, then I'm not doing that. Like,
hey, Michael, remember that time that you got home and you were getting your backpack and you looked in it and your He-Man was inside of it and you were like so excited?
Yeah, that was awesome.
God, I'm so stupid.
You are.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, that's unfortunate because there's a lot about where we as a generation came from that led us to this place, not just us in the room, but collectively all of us, and why we feel the way we do about this material, and that's often only touched on like a rock skipping over lake water. Like it's never really,
Yeah.
Way to be deep there.
I do what I can.
I mean, profound. That's why you're on the podcast tonight.
Whoa.
This is a really cool. So, welcome to Dreamland, the RetroBlasting podcast, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
I am your first host, Melinda.
I'm your second first host, Aaron.
And tonight we also have Michael French with us.
Hi.
Co-founder of RetroBlasting.
Hi.
Our third first host.
Am I the third first
You're
host?
the third not host.
I see you both as co-hosts, and I'm just
A dude.
a guest.
You're just a dude.
Right.
Hey, dude.
The guy on the couch.
Yeah. I wish we had a couch in here. It'd be great.
Half-baked reference.
Tonight we're recording our 13th episode of the show, which is really awesome because it's my favorite number. And so because of that, I thought it'd be really fun to sort of just get comfortable.
It's the quiet storm.
and just talk about something that we don't even have to do research for, because it's Michael French talking about what it is to be a collector and all kinds of things about collecting toys, vintage toys.
May I flip this for a second and ask you a question before we get started?
He always does this.
Well,
you can go to the bathroom. We'll talk.
I need to
Just cross your
need to
legs.
level set real quick and just figure out so are you trying to ask me questions about how I became a collector?
We're going to start there, and then we're just going to ride the wave.
Okay.
The Skittles wave of...
Gotcha.
Yes.
So this isn't going to be just hey, give us some tips on
What's your
buying
favorite
stuff.
What's your favorite toy?
Hey, Michael.
If I wanted to get a He-Man, Wonder Bread He-Man, where would I go to get that?
I feel like this is a backstory here.
Do you have some that you would like to sell me?
No.
Or give to me for free?
No.
My dad really loved that particular toy, and I would really love to give him one. Would you like to give me one for free that I could give to my dad?
I have this toy of my dad's that's totally trashed, and I'd really like to restore it for him for Christmas. Would you mind restoring it for me?
For free?
For free?
Not at all.
So it's not going to be that podcast.
I mean, now that we've already taken it there, we can talk about those things. But I think you've been on a lot of podcasts, Michael, about all kinds of collecting stuff, and and so you've told a lot of these stories before, and so I kind of don't want to just retread the same thing. But I think it would be, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you, at what point do you cross the line? Or let me rephrase that. At what point did you cross the line between just being a kid who had toys in the 80s and then being a collector? Like, what is that point in time?
It's funny when you go back and you hunt through all of your memories trying to answer a question like that. It's weird because it's like a line in the sand, and you think, okay, this is the line in the sand where I went from kid to collector. And then you think about it more and you're like, no, wait, I can go farther back. This might have been the line in the sand. Maybe not as defined. It's a little blurrier. Some of the surf went over it and kind of smoothed it out. But that's still and then you think, well, no, maybe it was back a little farther than that. And so then you start to realize maybe some people are just collectors genetically. Like they just have this thing where they collect. And I come from a family of people who you could argue actually have a hoarding complex. But they've always been interested in the past and things of the past, and they love their own collective past. Like they love the things from their generation, and that's part of it. But in the moment when you're a child and those products are being manufactured at that time, I would have to say it probably started when you flipped over that card back for whatever your favorite action figure line was. And in the 80s, it said collect them all. Mm-hmm. And then you had those rows that became like a checklist. And it was like, well, I really want this one. Like I really want Snake Eyes, or I really want to find, as I called him, Snowhan. Or Snow, what was it? Snowhan, and I called him Brown Luke because he was in like a khaki outfit. And so it was like, I want Brown Luke, which is actually Bespin Luke Skywalker. But so you start seeking those out. At that moment, you become a collector of sorts.
Well, when did you ever get to the point with the collect all 12 or collect whatever, where you're looking at all of them and you're like, oh, I want Brown Luke and I want this, where you see the characters that you think look really stupid, but you feel compelled to get them anyway so that you have them all? Like, is that part of being a, dyed-in-the-wool collector too? Or?
To be fair, Michael is kind of a fan of Bespin Luke.
I mean, it's super true.
Hi, my name's Michael, and I'm a Bespin,
Hi, Michael.
and I'm a Bespin Luke addict. That's a good question because even as an adult, I've said many times in videos that I've done that I resist the temptation to collect things that are really stupid in any line, whatever they are.
And then you founded RetroBlasting.
And then, even during RetroBlasting, I've said on camera before, I don't think I'm ever going to get any more of these. And then I end up getting them. So, like, for example, Jason the Wheeled Warriors, I said, it's a nice set, but am I ever going to collect any more of these? Probably not. Then I turn around and I get the base and I get the other vehicles and I get the parts and I get the this, and then I have to come back and say, yeah, so remember when I said that thing about not getting them all and then I got them all?
I mean, you're saying it as though they just magically appeared outside the door, but you bought them.
I did.
Yeah.
I went out and I sought them out. And that's something where I think it depends on what your focus is and how much you love that property. So in the case of Star Wars, for example, I eventually wanted to collect them all because that was a core interest for me when I was a kid. And so even though I objectively understand that an action figure called Yak Face is stupid on multiple levels, and it's expensive for reasons that are also dumb, I still have to have that one if I'm going to have them all. Yeah. Or like Aaron, you were with us in that random meeting when we met Seth at Plastic Galaxy that first time, and he had blue Snaggletooth, who's wearing big Barbarella Silver Moon boots, and you're like, okay, what is any layperson would probably be like, what's the fascination here? That thing's the doofiest looking action figure I've ever seen. But for me, I'm going, oh my gosh, that figure was only sold in a special, Sears exclusive, and it's the only way to get it now, and it was only sold for 1 year, and I don't have it. It's the last one I need. And, then you pay.
Thank you.
Bless you.
So there are other lines like Ninja Turtles where I will never want them all. I've done the video. I might do some more down the road that focus on specific things, but you're never going to see me be like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to feel whole unless I have all of the birthday turtles and all of the farmer turtles and all of the, I'm never going to be that into that line. Same thing with like real Ghostbusters. Unless there's a very compelling reason for somebody like to come at me and say, dude, I know I can get you, 1 million hits on a video if you'll just do slimed heroes. Then I'd be like, okay, great. But I think it depends on your interest. Now, I know that there are some people who are OCD. Like there are some people who have admitted they are OCD about everything. They have to be a completist for every line that they collect. They want every piece of everything.
So you got to feel sorry for the Star Wars collector, especially these days.
Yeah. I mean, the Star Wars people who collect modern, like they want every single thing.
I mean, how can you even do that?
There are people to this day that I've heard about who since 1995 when the toys were reissued and they were restarted, I guess, relaunched, they have collected 2 of everything since 22 years ago.
How far do you go when you're saying everything, though? Because
we're talking
because with Star Wars, it's ridiculous, right? Because it's not just toys, and it's not. I mean, you've got food products, and you've got magazines.
We're talking toys here. So
yeah, I'm saying there are people though who are like, I want every Star Wars thing. And
I
it's
know.
Like,
that's impossible. But
you go mad right now. I mean,
Yeah.
they've got Star Wars clothing, Star Wars
Right.
food,
right. Good luck.
Star Wars movies. Like, who wants those?
Right. I think there comes a point, like in the 90s when I was trying to do that as well for a brief moment because I thought, well, I'm not going to get caught with my pants down like I did when I was a kid and had no money. I'm going to get them all now. And I would try and get the Lay's potato chip bag that had the spirit of Obi-Wan on it.
The Monster Energy drink.
The Monster Energy drink. Yeah. The banana stickers that they're collecting now. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Banana stickers?
Yeah, that how Dole has the little sticker on a banana. Well, now there's Star Wars logos for it because Star Wars is partnered with Dole. It's stupid.
I'm Bob Dole.
I mean, there comes a point where, like in the 90s when I was trying to get everything, I was like, oh, well, I've got the Super Nintendo game, but I also need to get the Super Nintendo game strategy guide because that has Star Wars on it. Oh, I've got to get the Nintendo Power that has the Super Star Wars cover on it. Oh my gosh, Walden Books has a whole set of bookmarks. I've got to get all the bookmarks because they're Star Wars themed. I've got to get to see how ridiculous it gets.
Where do you draw that line?
Right.
Mean,
I
so
do.
much.
I mean, there have been maybe there have been like 3 times in my life where I got sucked into the collecting everything of a thing. And one was Tori Amos, which, I mean, I was pretty diligent with that for quite a few years. Every single magazine she appeared in, every single like tiny weird, even like obscure releases in other countries and stuff, I'd track them down. And this was in the 90s when it wasn't as easy to do that. Then there was the X-Files. I was super into that. Collected every single – I had the X-Files magazines. I still got a ton of them upstairs, every single thing. And Sandman was the same way too. So it's like – and Sandman was really what broke me of it because it's a comic book, but then they had all the figurines that were really, really expensive and hard to find and all these posters and T-shirts and da-da-da-da-da. And you just get to a point where you're like, it's so much work to research like what is coming out and what is out there because you hate to be, if you're a collector, or at least this is my understanding, right? If you're a collector and you're around other collectors who collect that thing and they're like, you don't know about the European release of such and such a thing. And you're like, I'm a loser. And so then you're no longer like this cool person. Like only with people who are not collectors are you like really knowledgeable about the thing. Because you're going to always find somebody who knows more, who has more disposable income, who can – and it's so competitive. It's like being in the Olympics but for buying crap.
Well, what was it that Homer Simpson said to Bart in that one episode where he's like –
I think it was dope.
He said there was some episode where he looked at Bart and he said – there's no point in trying to be the best at something because there's always going to be someone better than you. Like, and
it's so true.
It's
though.
a depressing thought. Here's the deal. When I collect, as far as going at it, psychologically, it's more about what do I either like the most or need the most to tell this story on video.
So before RetroBlasting.
Okay, so we're going to go to
yeah.
before.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
If you don't have that as a thing,
right?
What was your way of deciding? I mean, were you competitive? Because you've never struck me as a competitive collector. I know some competitive collectors, but
right.
you're more like, what do I have nostalgia for?
Right.
So that's always been your line.
Yeah, and it was always prioritized. So it was like, okay, Empire Strikes Back stuff is the most important. Got to get that stuff. Then I actually thought after that I would stop. I thought that, I'm not going to be that interested. I bought other Star Wars vintage stuff in the 90s when I was a teenager, vintage Star Wars stuff. But as I got my own disposable income, it was always a focus on the Empire Strikes Back stuff. And then when I got done with that, I thought, I never did have that metal Voltron. It'd be nice to have the whole metal Voltron. And then I went and got that. And then it was, there were certain G.I. Joes, the original 13. I didn't have them all. I had like 3 of them, and I wanted all of them. And so I went and got those. And then it just and then it was like, oh, those Silverhawks were so pretty. They were so cool looking. I only had one. I'd love to have the whole team set up under a light
to sparkle.
To sparkle, right. And then thank you, Edward. And then you get that you get the team and you say, oh, nice. And then you think, oh, well, I had the 4 Ghostbusters, but I never had their car.
What he's saying is this is never going to end.
Nope.
Well, but again, I mean, it does depend on your interests, and it depends on, here's the other thing. It also depends on what you remember. And there's a lot of people that I've met who are blessed with a terrible memory. And so because they don't remember half this stuff, they're not interested in going out and getting things beyond a little pocket here and there. Many people are just G.I. Joe, and they're just Transformers, or they're just He-Man, or they're just Star Wars. And God bless them, because that means they're not hungry for the other stuff. They don't sit around going, well, yeah, I remember the Indiana Jones line. Oh, and I remember Zorro and Lone Ranger. They were all kind of compatible, and they all had horses. Oh, and I really remember RoboForce. Those were so cool. Oh, and I really, it just, yeah. Oh, those GoBots are actually a lot cooler than people give them credit for. I need to go find more of those. So, because I have so many memories, but as far as going back before RetroBlasting, I think my collecting mentality really started with The Blank with Dick Tracy, because I couldn't find him. Mm-hmm. And he was on the back of the packaging. And I was like, where is this figure? And then come to find out, oh, it's because it was never actually distributed that summer, and it was only sold off in Canada because of Dick Tracy not being a good enough movie to sell the toys properly. And so then they held them back because they didn't want Madonna's face revealed. It was a whole thing, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that for 20 years. So that was what kind of started my collecting mentality, was the summer of 1990. And then after that, it was starting to buy them off kids as investments, the Star Wars figures, when I was living in London. And it was, trying to find, that was when I bought a complete set of the original Ninja Turtles and kept them in the package as a 12-year-old. And then Which
I have to say is not the experience that a lot of us have for being 12. A lot of my toys were out of the box, they were played with, and then they were gone.
Right.
So at some point you looked back and you had carefully maintained and kept all these things, and you were like, oh, I'm a collector. I mean, I'm ready to display these.
Yeah, and I displayed them in high school, my toys, and I even I had them all arranged kind of like we do now, except I didn't have glass display cases like I do now, but I had shelves, and I had them all, arranged, and I'd sit back and step back like a museum curator and see if it all looked great, and then I'd go back and fix them up. I don't know if that answers your question, but
well, let me look at my watch. I'm just kidding.
No,
it does. I mean, I feel like there's definitely a difference just from where I'm standing since we started RetroBlasting, and you're looking at things more from the perspective of what can I make a video out of and be informative, and what do I have something to say about?
Right.
What's going to make a good story versus what do I personally care about?
Right.
And so it's sort of taking you down new pathways as a collector that you probably otherwise wouldn't have. But so I got a message today from we have this guy, Tim Ward, who is really, really, really awesome. And
yeah, he runs our Facebook page and our YouTube comment sections.
Yeah, we love that guy.
And he does it well.
He does it very well.
He does it very well, and not only that, but he saves us a little bit of mental
anguish
because I don't know if those of you who are listening know what it's like to put yourself out there on the internet, but it's not always a comfortable, pleasant experience.
Oh, everybody's just lovely.
It's just, I don't know if you've ever been on the internet, but you should give it a shot. Just go out there and read the comments on any article or video that you see.
It's kind of a safe space.
It's uplifting. It makes you feel good about where humanity is headed.
Yeah, very inclusive. It's very nice.
Just highly intellectual comments that, will really make you think about things. But at any rate, Tim sent me a number of questions that, based on his experience from what he reads on these comments, might actually be worth talking about. So I'm going to go through some of these.
Okay.
Because I think they're really good. So what are some mistakes that you or other people have made when it comes to toy collecting?
I think some of the mistakes I've made, there was one mistake that I'm still paying for right now, which is I underestimated the rarity of a piece. And I bought one incomplete thinking that another one would come along, and it didn't.
So tell us the story of the Crystar Ice Castle.
Yes, so this is the Crystar Crystal Castle playset, and not to be confused with the Black Star Ice Castle playset.
Sorry, I still call it an ice castle.
They both look like ice castles.
Just look at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Crystar Crystal Castle from Remco, 1982, I believe. I thought at the time, falsely, because a number of them were sort of coming up on eBay. This was about 3 years ago. I was under the false impression that because I saw 2 to 3 of them within a 3-month, 4-month period that, I was going to be able to get 2 and put together one, And so I went and bought one. And then right as I did that, everything dried up. And I didn't see them online again for 2.5, 3 years. And when I would see one, it was missing the exact same pieces that mine was missing. And I realized I was in a quandary because it was now rare enough that I didn't want to get rid of the incomplete one I had, but I didn't know how long it was going to be before another one came along. So there are certain pieces that you really need to study their rarity before you jump into buying an incomplete copy. Like there are some toys where I would say, yeah, they're numerous enough that it's probably good to just put together a complete one from a few. But there are a few pieces, especially some of the play sets and some of the vehicles, where you just, I say, stay away until it's complete,
Yeah, and I would say, just as a side note on that, if there's something that you're thinking about, like if you're a serious toy collector and there's something that you're like on the fence about, should I get this? Don't ever assume that just because you've seen a few of them in the last month, that next month you'll see a few of them, because it's completely sporadic and unpredictable.
Right. And I lost one of my holy grails that I'm not going to mention on this podcast.
Right.
I lost that because we made the decision to save money that month. It came up. It was complete. It was beautiful. And we were like, we can
It's big.
wait.
And
we'll wait. It's expensive.
Yeah.
We'll just wait. And then it was like, oh.
Right.
Well, they're not making any more of these things, so
Right.
they're only going to get more and more rare.
Right.
So banking on seeing another one, there may not actually be another one.
Right. Exactly.
And I mean, that actually goes to, and this isn't exactly toys, but it's related in terms of like our channel, which is cartoons. If you have any interest at all in watching classic cartoons from when we were kids, they are sometimes out on DVD, but don't ever assume that they're going to be from day to day because people, those Mill Creek and all kinds of those places that produce them will cancel them and then they skyrocket in price. So you could pay $3 or $4 for it on Amazon and then 2 weeks later it's $95 to get a DVD.
I had that experience with Invader Zim. Like we had lunch that day and I bought that thing at Best Buy ages ago. And someone was like, "Hey, what's that on your shirt?" I was like, "Invader Zim," and they looked it up on their phone. It was like $238.
Yep.
For that set of DVDs.
Yep. I made the mistake the other day of trying to see if the Filmation Zorro cartoon from the early 80s was available on DVD. Now, unrelated to this, the Amazon results popped up the Walt Disney Archive Classics DVD set of the live-action show from the 60s with Guy Williams. It was a set they brought out over 10 years ago at this point. I had bought this 10 years ago for my mom because she grew up with the show. So I'd gotten it for $39.99 or whatever it was, $49.99 at the time. I forgot that I was looking for the cartoon because I was staggered to see that Amazon had one for sale from a third party and the price was $495.95. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I called my mom immediately and I was like, you still have that DVD set, right? You haven't lent it out. She's like, no, I've still got it. I said, do not let it out of the house. I said, it is worth $500. She's like, what? I said, just don't let it out of your sight. Just keep it safe. So
keep it secret.
keep it safe.
It's one of those DVDs, and I mean, we're talking DVD quality. It's not like
Right.
they're these great Blu-ray, steel case, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of them don't get reprinted. They
Right.
just get canceled, and whoever's holding the license now, because all of the companies are now defunct, maybe
Right.
not all of them, but a lot of them who, these things were sold out to these weird production or these distribution companies and stuff, and they don't always they sometimes go under, and then the license is just sort of left floating out somewhere in the ether, and so you can't get these things. So all I'm saying is if there's something, whether it's a toy or a DVD or something that comes across your mental vision and you're like, hey, I kind of like that, if you see it out there in the world, just snag it because you don't know.
Right. You don't know. I mean, you could turn around tomorrow and it's out of your reach financially.
Yeah.
Well, I
it's
think
just
one
not
of the
good.
other things too is that it has to be important to you.
Right.
So, collecting based on what you think other people are going, to be excited about and like, if you're not a public person who is presenting this on the internet and stuff, it needs to be something that you're proud of for its own sake, intrinsically. Right. So, things like you could go out and buy all these DVDs,
right?
As you think, oh, maybe they're going to be worth a bunch, but make sure it's something that you actually feel strongly about.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't say to ever bank on, just in the same exact way, I wouldn't bank on any of these things being worth money at any particular time in the future.
Oh, yeah, we're not talking about this as you got to do this as an investment.
No, but I can see exactly what Aaron's saying, which is the inverse of what I'm saying, which is these things can become discontinued instantly and become worth a lot of money, but you're not guaranteed that if you buy, like, the Care Bears cartoon series that it's going to be discontinued at any point.
Right.
And, so that's not a great investment.
It's kind of the thing, like Michael said, you just turn around one day and go, oh, wow, that's super rare now.
Right.
But you had no idea that was going to be the case.
Exactly.
Yeah. So another question, and it's similar, is what are some of the happy accidents that you have encountered or things that worked out unexpectedly?
One of my favorite things about toy collecting is when I end up with these random piles of parts and they just happen to flow through with random lots and things like that I have to get because I'm wanting one or two pieces, but I don't throw anything away. I keep the other pieces. And then I think, oh, I've got 3 out of the 5 pieces for this toy, and I don't have the toy itself, but I've got 3 out of the 5 accessories for it, right? And then I go on eBay and I find the toy with only the other 2 accessories. And then I buy it, and then those 3 accessories get wrapped in. They get absorbed. It's a 1-to-1 thing. And
That is
then,
pretty great.
Yeah, and then you don't double up on something. It's not like it shows up and then suddenly you've got 2 copies of the accessory. It all just kind of – and then –
Which isn't a bad place to be.
No, it's not.
Having a spare isn't a bad thing.
No, spare is definitely not a bad thing, especially with like vintage Star Wars weapons and things like that. But for the most part, I like it when things work out like that, where I see that my bag of parts diminish in the right way because those parts went exactly to the toys that needed them. So
Yeah, that's a little crazy OCD.
yeah.
But that's fine.
Well, no, but that's part of it. I mean, that's, I've got a bag right now of weapons from, it's not Supernaturals. It's another toy line, but they're all from the same toy line. And I'm just thinking to myself, gosh, if I can just get the toys from that line and then take this Ziploc bag full of weapons and make it empty.
When people send us these big grab bags of stuff, they don't realize what they're starting.
Well, I mean, there's a He-Man character called Modulok, and he was meant to be popped apart, and then you could.
He's modular.
He's modular, and then you could put him back together in like a billion combinations, right? So he was a bazillion pieces. And I've ended up probably with 2.5 fully complete Moduloks just because of random piles of stuff that have come through. And I've, there's more Modulok parts in here. And then the next thing I know, I've got another Modulok. It's that kind of thing.
A bag full of Modulok parts.
A bag full of Modulok.
What I love is when I get my favorite happy accident is when I get a grab bag of like My Little Ponies and I find at least one that looks like complete crap. I mean, just ragged out, dirty, awful, and then I clean it up and it looks absolutely stunning. Mm-hmm. That is so gratifying to me to find one that, I mean, you can probably you can go really far with like restoring them and like fixing their hair and all that, but I just mean ones that are just dirty and all they needed was just a little bath and a little scrub-a-dub and you wash that hair and it's just like, yeah. It's amazing. And it just feels so great because it's like I feel like I rescued this toy. Mm-hmm. So that's mine, which is a little different than yours, but it's very gratifying.
The other happy accidents are things like you're at a swap meet or you're at a flea market or you're at a not a garage sale so much. Those are always – the garage sale's pretty much dead at this point, but you're at like a toy show. And a lot of the vendors will always have like the bargain bin. Vintage toys, but – they're like the beaten up toys that don't have any accessories and they just want to clear them out and most people don't want them, and they're like, $2 or $3 a figure, right?
So I guess the moral is hold on to those parts that you don't have the toys for because when you go to these shows, it's like this crazy opportunity to buy those happy accidents.
Yes.
When you find a Ram Man without an arm and you have a Ram Man's arm at home.
Oh, my God. No, what I'm referring to are things like I was at Joe Lana last year and
I was too.
Me too.
You were both there. And somebody ran over and told me, hey, you got to check out this guy. He's got this big box of vintage Star Wars figures that have no accessories. I just got these in there. And I'm like, no way. And so I ran over there and I thought I'd look. I had all the figures, but I just, you always look, right?
I mean, you probably got like 15 or 20 more Bespin looks, I think.
So... But I happened to look in there and I was rummaging around and not many people were paying it much attention because right now the mentality is get them complete, get the weapons, get the stuff. Well, the Jedi Luke Skywalker action figure was one of the few Lukes that was made where the head was molded in the color of his hair and then his face was painted onto the front.
Which means all of them now, or most of them, are going to be just Luke's the color of his hair.
Right. Most of them have
He's just beige.
They have the brown nose.
Just beige.
They have this brown dot on their nose because their nose gets rubbed because it's the most prominent part of the head, and so then it falls on the floor.
That's not how you get a brown nose.
But the other Lukes that were made by Kenner were molded in the color of his skin, and then the hair was painted on, so you didn't have that issue where his face looked stupid when he got scratched. So,
be nice.
But very briefly, at the beginning of the manufacturing of the Jedi Luke figure, there was a factory, I think it was in Taiwan, and they made it where there was the traditional way where Luke's face his head was molded in the color of his face, and then the hair was painted on. Well, I already had one that I had gotten at great cost off of all places, Etsy, and I got it for like $70 because when we were kids, the Jedi Luke with the brown nose was really annoying. Like that was just like, brown nose Luke. So
That was my wrestling name in high school.
Brown Nose Luke. So
It's not quite as good as Cool Hand Luke, but
So what I did was I, had him on display in the house, and I thought, well, I'll just go over to this box of random figures and just look through it just to see what's in there. And sure enough, there was a Jedi Luke in there, no accessories, and I instantly looked at him and I could tell, oh my gosh, this is the rare painted-haired Jedi Luke. And I pulled him out and I was like, $3? And the guy's like, yeah, $3. And I'm like, and I turned around and my friend who had called me over was like, what is this? He goes, don't you have that one already? I said, painted hair, molded face. He's like, what? How did I not see that? And I'm like, got to educate yourself.
That was what your talk at Joe Lana was about, actually.
Right. So
it's a really good talk.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought it was at TED. It was great.
I mean,
mystery box.
If only we could
Okay, let's leave Abrams out of this.
If only we could have TED Talks for toy collectors. Okay.
We'll just leave this there.
Just leave that there. Are there any toy lines that you knew would be a major success that other people doubted?
You mean as a kid? I got a great.
He doesn't specify, but I'll say sure.
I will tell you
Yes,
not to keep bringing up the same toy line because I'm not trying to, but it is the toy line by which all others are measured and the reason which they're all.
It's the reason
collected.
we're all here.
Yeah,
all humans.
When I was in I'm not kidding. When I was in the 5th grade, I harassed all the kids in my Cub Scout troop, or my former Cub Scout troop, because I had moved on to Boy Scouts. But
Maybe
anyway,
use a different word.
That was one of those things that I thought but didn't say.
That's why I'm here.
I was hanging out after school one day.
And just punching them.
And the Cub Scouts were hanging out, and I was telling all of them, I was like, don't get rid of your Star Wars toys. And I was only, 10 at the time? I mean, this was...
I mean, 5th grade is 10.
Yeah, this was about 88. And I was like, don't get rid of your Star Wars toys. They're going to be worth a fortune one day. Don't get rid of them. Even though I just bought a beaten-up Death Star playset for $2 at a garage sale, I was convinced these things were going to be worth a lot of money. So... I'm not saying I'm a soothsayer or anything like that. But you asked the question. So at the age of 10, I was already speculating that Star Wars would be worth a lot. Thank God I was right on that one. I didn't think for a minute that these other lines would be worth what they're worth.
When you were a kid, when you were at that age, did you have any other friends who were also collectors like you? Or were you the only one who was like into it at that point?
I was the only
level,
one.
I mean.
I was the only one. Everybody else was bailing. I was still fascinated by toys growing up. Like, I never lost the interest in them because of their mechanisms and the way they were designed and how they worked. And I was taking my toys apart when I was 10. I mean, I was drawing diagrams of their internal components. I still have them. I think I've posted some of them on the Facebook page and how they worked and where the screws went and all that kind of stuff. I really loved the engineering of toys. And so no, the other kids actually started to think I was a late bloomer. Like they really did. I mean, they were like, I'm moving on to sports ball and I'm moving on to,
Well, I think that's a really interesting, just brief segue that I feel like every time we talk about this topic or every time I hear somebody else talking about this topic, I feel like they don't really go into this, but there's this huge thing with like when you're a kid and you're getting to be of age and you start like you have that time. It's like a phase. It's a short phase where you kind of just get where you don't play anymore. You don't use your imagination and play with toys. Like you just can't do it anymore or something. Something in your brain changes. And it's usually around like between the ages of like 11 and 13 to 14, like in that time frame.
Right.
And so you may still like toys, but it's not like you're playing with them like you did when you were 8. And so at that point, you're supposed to then feel, or this is how it seemed to me, it seemed like you were supposed to feel ashamed that you ever had toys because you're trying so hard to establish that you're an adult or that you're a grown-up and that you're mature and that you're all these things. And so you go through this huge thing where you shun everything that you liked as a little kid, because that's little kid crap, and it's stupid. And like, I don't have my toys on display. Like, I'm a cool teenager now. I'm 14. Whatever. And girls are the same way, guys do it. It's this whole thing. And I feel like once you switch into that mentality, it's like your brain just never lets it go. And by the time you're 30, you don't have to establish anything because you're 30. Like no one's thinking that you're 8 anymore. So you don't have to shun your toys. You can just go, well, I don't really play with toys anymore, but I have fond memories of them and I think they're cool. And I don't have to like insult other people to make myself seem more mature because you're 30, dude. You don't need to be mature. You're paying taxes. Like, what are you worried about?
Right.
And so there's still all these jock assholes that like want to say stuff like, oh, well, you're like the, this like virgin and you don't do this and you don't, like you don't, because like it's the same crap that a 14-year-old would say to another 14-year-old if they went over to their house and saw that they still had their He-Man figures on a shelf somewhere. It's like, oh, well, you're just a virgin. It's like, hey, we're 14. We're both virgins. Get over it. But
right.
I mean, you see what I'm saying, though? There's that whole mentality. And I mean, I see it all the time, even at work, even at people like with people that I work with now. They're like, God, I can't believe that you play with toys. It's like, if that's what you really think, like, what?
Well, they only see toys one way. So they see them as things to be played with. They're the ones that threw them away and don't realize that they're worth a lot of money now. Not that money is the only reason to have toys, but they don't understand how you can possibly create entertainment with them. And they don't understand that's not playing. Like, this is work. I enjoy my toys in that room and I enjoy working with them for videos and stuff like that, but I don't play with them. Sometimes I have to figure out how they work if they're broken. That's a very different thing. But they can't get there. And that goes all the way back to like I was in the 3rd or 4th grade and we did that stupid Christmas time swap gifts thing, but
like
it was
White
all
Elephant?
Yeah, White Elephant, but it's all random, And I remember that I convinced my mom that what I thought was going to be cool to get for a gift was I got the G.I. Joe Devilfish vehicle and wetsuit, the character wetsuit, and I put them in a box, and that was my gift to whoever, and because I would have thought that was amazing, right? The kid that got that gift was blown away. Like, he thought that was because it was the bigger box and it had like 2 things in it, and one was a vehicle and one was an action figure, and they were getting older. They were getting to that point where Little League was taking over and stuff, but the kid was still wowed by it. I, on the other hand, opened up a paperback book of football statistics.
Sweet.
Like,
you still have it?
No.
He has such fond memories of
and
that.
it was this kid named Philip, who, by the way, was the one that had the flag that I talked about. And I'm like...
So he should have got it.
Well, first of all, even if you grow out of toys, a book is never a cool gift.
Well, a book of statistics.
Right. It's like, oh my God, was this a regift? Who?
His uncle gave it to him.
Who buys this for friends at school? I actually cried. Like, it was that bad. Like, I didn't cry in front of everybody.
That is the worst.
Yeah. I went off into a corner and just lamented my lot in life. I was like...
I believe that.
Yeah. I was
Tore
like...
your clothes.
Everyone but me in this room deserves this book.
Yeah.
Everybody else is giving a crap. I don't. Like, this is the worst gift. And then the next year, I got Philip's gift again in the White Elephant. I couldn't get away from this guy. Like, it just...
And he had
faked.
such cool stuff.
Anyway, he gave away this stupid travel game called Flip Sides. It looked like a cassette tape, but you flipped it out and it was like a travel board game or whatever. And I thought it was just chintzy. And my friend Parker got a mini Lego space kit, like a Lego man with the spaceship and everything. And it was like a lunar
Benny.
rover. Yeah, and I was like, whoa, cool. And he's like, I'll trade you, because he was getting to that age where he didn't want a Lego thing anymore. And I was like, sweet. So we traded, and Philip got so mad. And I finally just looked at Philip and I said, I'm sorry, Philip, your gifts are lame and I don't like them.
I think Philip went to the store with his mom and she got like a really cool gift, and then like he wanted it. And so then he found some old thing in his room and brought it to school.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that sounds like.
That's what I would do.
So I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but I'm just saying.
It was a fun tangent.
No,
And
that was the backstory of why you're a supervillain now.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Dang you, Philip.
Philip, please write us. I want to. Okay.
But don't give us anything.
No, absolutely
For the
not.
love of God.
What toy line has surpassed you by their Nope.
Take 2.
What toy line has surprised you by their unexpected success?
Define success. Success at the time they're being made, or success?
I assume he means
in
success in the marketplace.
They made a bunch of money.
It's like secondhand value. Are we talking about secondhand value?
First and second hand.
I'm thinking firsthand when I read that, but I guess you could read that as secondhand. Like, there's a lot of those where, something sucked initially, and that's why it's successful. It's not really successful, though. It's just rare. So that's why I think it means if you're saying success, then the toy line they had to make money on it when it was first made.
I think that the toy line that surprises me most as far as secondhand value going up is Thundercats. And not because I don't like Thundercats. I'm surprised by Thundercats' rising value in the marketplace because Thundercats was so popular at the time that a lot of those toys were made. And so they're not hard to find. So I'm like, why is the price of those items rising so quickly? As far as something that was successful in its inception that I wasn't prepared for, probably something like Muscles. Because as a kid, I didn't like Muscle Men.
Mm-hmm.
They were...
Do you remember those, Aaron?
Oh, yeah. I somewhere in my house, there's a big bag of them.
Oh, see? Yeah. And they're very collectible. And they're worth, some certain ones are worth a lot of money.
And I got them secondhand. Like, these were the doubles that one of my friends had. So he threw them all in a bag and said, hey, here.
Right.
Here you go.
And they're very collectible. People still love them today. I don't get it.
Well, they were kind of like Garbage Pail Kids and things like that, where they were all just infinite variations on a theme.
Right.
So once again, that was the experience I had with collecting, was suddenly wanting to get specific ones that my friend had.
Right.
So, and they
but
were
there
hard
was no
to
way to
find.
specifically get them because you never knew what you were getting, right?
Right, yeah. And I got most of mine secondhand, so it was more of a trading experience for me. So
I've heard that that's what kids did, is that they would trade them in big groups. And
yeah.
It seems like you'd have to have friends to do something like that.
It was like our version of baseball cards.
Right.
Again, like I was an only child and I didn't have a lot of friends. So all those types of things I was always mystified by when I would hear of these hobbies, and I'm like, so you're just going to keep buying these blind packs of cards and like you're just going to have like 50 of the same 3 cards because there's always you always have like one that just shows up every single time.
Right.
So, yeah, it never even occurred to me trading was like
Cal Ripken.
Right.
Okay. What can collectors do to maintain the condition of loose toys or even mint on card toys?
I don't know. Basics are always the best. Basic rules. Keep them out of the sunlight. It's like gremlins. Keep them out of the sunlight. Don't get them wet.
Midnight.
Don't feed them after midnight. That's what I try and do. I mean,
Keep them away from fluorescent lights.
Yes, no fluorescent lights.
No sunlight.
Keep them away from intense heat sources. Don't use.
Don't give them to your kids.
Don't give them to your kids.
Don't let the dog play with them.
Yeah. Don't use chemical solvents on them to clean off, stains or marker lines or anything like that. I mean, when we built the studio, I deliberately walled up the basement windows because I wanted to make sure that no matter...
Think about how many times we had to tell the contractors, yeah, we really want to just wall up these windows in our daylight basement.
I regret nothing.
I regret nothing.
Because I can operate in my basement studio and not worry about where I'm setting something for a sunlight pattern the next day.
Listen, guys, if you want to sell it to your wife, because, I always hear that the girlfriends and the wives give the guys a hard time about this kind of stuff. All you got to do is say, look, this is how you make a great movie room. Am I right? I mean, because then it's like, oh, it's like a dark, you can turn the lights off and it's so dark and you can watch any TV. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a giant TV. It can just be like, it looks amazing in the darkness.
Yep.
So
it does.
And you have Schrodinger's daytime. You just don't know.
You don't. You go downstairs and you come up and the sun's down. You're
Yeah.
like, whoa.
it's like you're at Dragon Con because you have literally no idea what time it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like you walk out and it's dark all of a sudden. You're like, oh my God, how long have I been down there?
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Hours.
Yep.
Buried alive.
This is a great question. What are the most irritating trends in modern collecting?
Modern collecting, so meaning collecting modern toys, or the modern day of collecting vintage toys?
Oh, I read it as modern toys.
Okay,
but
modern toys.
If you want to say modern vintage collecting, if there's a trend there, I guess that's also
the most annoying thing about modern collecting as a trend is pop vinyls. That's because it is the Beanie Baby of our generation and nobody's noticing. And I've got friends like Seth who run Plastic Galaxy, these toy stores, vintage toy stores, collectible toy stores. And they say people are already starting to bring in pallet loads of these things, trying to get rid of them. And people are like, no, these were obviously the
like
latest
tribbles.
fad. Yes. They have no value. You shouldn't have bought into them. You were
that's like when
suckered.
we were in Tampa and we went to Big Redhead
Uh-huh.
Vintage Collectible. I
Yep.
can't remember if that's the name, the official
Chuck
name.
store. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great store, by the way, if you're in that area. But he said the exact same thing. He has a few pop vinyls when you walk in because he's like, you kind of have to have them.
Right.
But he has no love lost for them.
Right.
And he doesn't buy them back.
Right.
And so it's just like, we're right at the tipping point of people really wanting to sell a lot of those back into the market. And it's
Right.
just like,
Well, when you go to Dragon Con and go to the store, the area where they have all the vendors, there's just walls of
Yeah.
pop vinyl.
Yeah, they're
in
like they
there.
build castles you walk into of them. It's crazy.
I mean, do you remember the big thing about all the ET cartridges from Atari
Yep.
that got filled into the landfill? And can you imagine how much more pop vinyls there are?
Oh yeah.
And vinyl's biodegradable, so yeah, they got that going for them.
The other annoying thing about modern collecting, I find, is the distribution problems because you have fewer actual toy companies selling to stores. So like Hasbro's distribution is really terrible. So you go into a toy store today, like Toys R Us, which is on borrowed time, or Target or Walmart. You go to their toy section and it often looks like a Soviet grocery store. I mean, there's like nothing hanging on the pegs. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, you're literally the only game in town now. You successfully destroyed or bought out every other toy company in the last 20 years, and this is the result? Like, you're king of the hill, so now you don't sell anything, you don't distribute it properly? Like, there are things from the Rogue One toy line that I never saw here in Atlanta.
Well, I thought
That's
that was
weird. This
that
is a
was-
huge market.
Exactly.
I thought it was really interesting when we were buying those because, I really didn't realize, modern collectors have a whole different process. Like they like to find toys, quote unquote, in the wild. They like to go to a store and actually find the toy and buy it instead of ordering everything on Amazon, which I would be like, and click, click, click. Okay, now I have all of that.
And they're fast getting to the point where you have no choice.
Well,
You have
right.
to.
I mean, that's exactly right. It's like, how do you, we've known people who can go to like those secondhand, what are those? Like, it's not Best Buy. What's it called?
Talking about like Tuesday morning or something?
Yeah, like Tuesday morning. And then there's another one. There's other stores like that where it's like they have all this clearance stuff that was like didn't sell the first time
Right.
around.
Like
and they,
Ross kind of stores.
Like
Yeah.
Ross, but then there's
Yeah.
one that's like it's not Family Dollar, but that's what it feels like. It's
Right.
like a dollar store, but they'll have toys. And like I remember you found something there one time that was like marked down some enormous amount, like 75%.
Right.
But I mean, we never find that kind of stuff. But I guess if you really go out and just search constantly, you can find.
Well, there was a guy online today that said that he found the two characters that I had been looking for last year for Rogue One that I never found. He just found them randomly at a J.C. Penney's today.
Wow.
And it's like, wait, what?
It's end of life. I mean, it's the way a lot
Yeah.
of these stores work. So if these things get to the end of their run, they've got a huge warehouse and they just, fraction them out to
Yeah.
all kinds of places.
But where were they when they were hot? That's the thing. Why were those boxes not coming out of the distribution center when they were hot?
That is weird. One of the other things about modern collecting that I, kind of from the outside, because I'm not as much of a collector as you guys are, is just the infinite variation. Like right now with manufacturing being the way it is, they make all these runs of different types,
right,
different colors, things like that. And then on top of that, you have the ultra premium stuff. So then you can get into the $400 or $500 versions of the, the Enterprise or something.
Right.
And, or like the thing that comes to mind is like the Spawn figures. So the McFarlane kind of stuff where it's really kind of expensive and priced. It's not really a toy anymore. It's more of a statue.
Right.
So, at that point you can really like, where do you find the niche? Like,
sure.
And I think for you, it's always been stuff that you would have played with as a kid.
Yes.
So
yes, I'm not into the whole Hot Toys sideshow. I respect them. I like how detailed they are, but I don't really want to.
I think Star Trek or Star Wars might be a place where I would consider it, just to get like an Enterprise D that lights up and has all those cool kind of features.
Yeah.
But, just in general, probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you with Sandman or something really
I saw
detailed.
a really cool Freddy Krueger.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Oh, man, that's a really cool one.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't hard to stop myself from buying it.
I have an Akira. Like it's not Akira himself. It's actually it's Tetsuo, and it has two arms. So he has his regular arm that you can take off and then put that when he goes into full crazy mode, and it just goes coming out. Yeah, it's got one of those too.
Yeah. There was a story that I read. Wasn't a story. I'm sorry. It was a chat that I read about a year ago now. Maybe it was probably February. I think it was February, March. And it was about some collectors. They were all chatting about the last wave of Rogue One, a wave of the smaller figures that I never saw here in Atlanta. And they were at New York. Was it New York Toy Fair? It was one of those events. And they were talking to reps at Hasbro. And they said, when is this wave going to come out? And Hasbro said, well, it's kind of out now. If you find them on eBay, you need to get them while you see them.
Wow. Like they just didn't make many of them.
I was like, okay, wait a second. Random businesses on eBay, fly-by-night scalper businesses are getting these toys and major retailers aren't. And Hasbro clearly knows this because they just gave collectors advice to get them wherever they find them on eBay, even if the prices are inflated, because they'll probably never see them again. What is Hasbro doing as a business that makes that possible?
They're probably shipping them to Target, and these other businesses are paying people a small finder fee to just go buy all of them off the shelf the day they come in.
And that's why modern collecting to me is not fun. I mean, it's a beast, and it's
well, it's a business now. So.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some of the whimsy that's not there. What do modern collectors get right that previous generations perhaps misunderstood?
Well, again,
let's see if Michael can come up with an answer.
Again, is that modern collectors, like collectors of modern toys, or modern time collectors? I
would just say contemporary.
I would say
whatever's
contemporary, current collectors today. What do collectors today get right that previous generations perhaps misunderstood?
Well,
like if you became a collector like last month versus someone who's been collecting as long as you have, is your strategy going to be different? Is there some way your approach that is different? I don't know.
Well, a lot of modern collectors, they collect mint and box immediately. They don't open anything. That to me is neither right or wrong because I don't collect for the purposes of speculative value. So that's not really an issue for me. Now, obviously, we do make sure that if something vintage is still packaged that comes into our collection, we don't open it because that's just setting money on fire. Like, I get that. But
I do that.
Do you?
Setting money on fire?
No, I don't.
But with modern collectors, that's the double-edged sword because everybody's collecting mint and package. So there's really no increased value down the line because everybody has surpluses of these things hoarded up in storage bins, and they all get broken. The Power of the Force toys, for example, from the 90s, the relaunched Star Wars toys. People were buying those 2 and 3 at a time thinking, I'll have one to keep in mint, one to keep complete loose, and then one to just have to sell. And it's like, okay, now they're all still mint on card. Now there's no difficulty getting any of those mint on card. But people were buying them at high prices back then because there was a simulated rarity, like simulated supply and demand. Like it was and then the bubble burst, and then you couldn't give them away. You still can't give them away. I mean, certain Star Wars collectors like to say now, "Oh, Power of the Force is finally rising up in value." I'm like, yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. Like, there's just too much of it. Mm-hmm. So that's the double-edged sword. But the thing that modern collectors, are doing wrong, in my estimation, is that they are supporting businesses that are – the businesses are banking on them to buy it because there's a logo of something on it, whether it's a Batman logo or a Star Wars logo or a Marvel logo. Mm-hmm. And they're not always doing right by the collector, but the collector now has this mentality much like a television consumer or moviegoer where they say, well, no, you need to go buy a ticket to it and support it because otherwise they won't make any more. Even if it sucks, they won't make any more. And they do that with toys too. Well, yeah, I know these action figures are terrible and they didn't distribute them properly, but you still need to buy them because otherwise they might not make any more. You got to support the hobby. No. No.
Just no.
No, you know, oh, is Hasbro too big to fail? Is Mattel too big to fail? Because now Hasbro wants to buy Mattel.
So we're dealing with big toy. I got it.
We're dealing with big toy. Yeah, we are. I mean,
is there any way that – so to me it doesn't seem like it's ever going to be what it was in the 80s because after the 80s, during the 80s and after, the big toy companies figured out that there's a market beyond just children in this and collectors themselves. And I'm not saying it's their fault per se. I'm just saying that because collectors exist and now the toy companies are clued into that as a financial market – it's forever changed toys. Mm-hmm. It's forever changed merchandising for films and comic books and all the things that geeky people love because they are all aware that there's a lot of geeks with apparently enough disposable income that they can buy all this stuff. So they're marketing to the collectors more than to kids now.
Right.
And so therefore the magic or the whimsy or whatever you want to call it that where a kid's going to get that toy and play with it and then at some point in the future it's going to be valuable because the parts got lost on most kids' toys. And it's not that it's meant on card. It's that, wow, I remember that and now it's kind of hard to find because they only made a few of them and now most of them are broken and blah, blah, blah. Like that's what we're faced with as vintage collectors. Whereas modern collectors aren't really going to ever have to – because they're making 10 times the amount of a lot of these things. And even if they don't, most of the people buying them, just like you said, are keeping the mint in the box because they're thinking they're going to sell them. Mm-hmm. So you may have to wait for a while or look for it hard on eBay, but eventually you're going to find one. It's probably going to be mint in the box.
Yeah.
Whereas,
they're making artifacts now instead of toys.
Right.
The Crystar castle
the Crystal
is not
castle.
Something that you're going to find. Most likely you're not going to find one mint in the box.
Right. There's been one mint in the box like in the last 3 years on eBay.
Right.
Like
so
now,
I mean, yeah.
You'll find the box, but you won't find it sealed in the box.
And there might be a mint in it. Okay, that was bad.
Peppermint patty.
No, there's the rarity factor for toys when they were manufactured strictly for children and the perceived market was only for children makes the rarity 10 times more. I mean, it's this and the scarcity. There's a great news clip from 1983 from a local news station. It's on YouTube and it's from the Midwest somewhere. And it's this guy talking about the phenomenon of Return of the Jedi toys. They're like, the new movie's coming out this weekend, but we're here at the local Toys R Us, because there's some real fervor over the Star Wars toys. And they actually have a segment after he does the, talking to kids and all that kind of stuff. There's actually a moment where there's a grown man who looks like Napoleon Dynamite with a mustache. I mean, he's literally down there. God
bless you, 1983.
He's like digging through Admiral Akbars and stuff. And the news commentator is like the news anchor. The on location reporter is like, and we even have some adults looking at this stuff. And he puts the mic. He's like, "Sir, what are you doing buying children's toys. And he's like, I have all of these. He's like, they're going to be worth something someday. And he's like, it's a worthy investment. He's like, I have them all in the package. And he's like, and then the guy looks at the camera like the dude's crazy. And he's like, well, back to you, like weirdo. And you're going, how wrong you were, Mr. Muggle, sir. How wrong you were. This guy might seem odd back then because those toys were really marketed as just children's playthings.
Right.
But he had the what do you call it? The sage-like wisdom that nobody else had.
Yeah.
So
do you feel like that stigma is still something that people have against toy collectors?
Oh,
like if you tell people at work, for example, that you collect toys, they look at you like you're a pedo.
It's more acceptable now than it was.
But you still see it. I mean, we've seen it.
Oh, yeah. And even a television show like Big Bang Theory, which is said to have normalized geek culture, still makes a joke out of four guys who enjoy, genre toys and stuff. Like, they're still the oddballs. They're still the butt of the joke.
Which is kind of funny because these days it doesn't really feel like those people are the oddballs anymore. Like, you can see any Muggle that you want wearing a Green Lantern T-shirt in the Kroger. Right. I mean, when we went this past weekend, we went to see Thor.
Uh-huh.
And in front of us, now I found this adorable, but I'm just saying, in front of us there were like two couples, and they were wearing like Star Wars shirts and whatever, and they were like our parents' age. And they were all excited about this movie, and they were all excited about all the previews, and they were like, I mean, they were seriously like in their 60s, which I'm not saying that's old, but I'm just saying that generation was not super embracing of these things. And so it's just, to me, that just shows that it's all very mainstreamed.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Geek culture's super mainstreamed.
Right.
So I don't know what that has to do with anything, but
it was nice, though. It was very nice.
It was informative, and I think people learned something from it. And I feel good about it.
Informative and rich.
Like a Mounds.
Right, like a Mounds bar.
That's what I always think when I unwrap a Mounds. Like, my oh my, that's informative and rich.
Thank you, Peter Paul.
You're welcome. I'm sorry. I've run out of brain juice.
One of the things I find the most interesting and engaging about the collecting that I do and the way I collect is I'm not interested in mint and package toys. I'm not interested in mint on card. I'm not interested in prototypes or things that weren't available on toy store shelves. I liked the things that were mass produced, the things I remember being on the shelves, the things I couldn't necessarily get at the time that I wanted to acquire. And it's funny when you're navigating back through that and you're collecting, it's this stream of conscience kind of process, because you're thinking, well, I got to get some pieces for this, because that is probably the most satisfying thing, is finally reuniting childhood pieces that you have with the parts they've lost. That's one of the most satisfying things. Today I just got the cardboard inserts for the computer for He-Man's Point Dread Talon Fighter base, and those cardboard parts, they got thrown away, and so getting that again was really cool. But when you have so many lines that you're trying to collect, you find yourself going like, okay, I'm going to get those cardboard parts for this, and I got to get an extra wing, and then you turn around and you look over, and it's kind of like squirrel, because like you see this other line, and you're like, oh, I still need Butch Cavendish for the Lone Ranger line, and I still need, Buffalo Bill for that. Not to be confused with Silence of the Lambs. I was
like, they made an action figure for Buffalo Bill?
The real Buffalo Bill.
That's awkward.
I need those, and then so you go looking for those, and then you think, well, I need the Zorro stuff too, and then you go looking for that, but then there's none of it on eBay that you can get, so you back off that, and then you're like, oh, but I'm working on that Thundercats video, so I need some more Thundercats, and then you go after those, and then you realize you spent too much money, right? But then you still need one or two more pieces. I mean, it's a stream of conscious thing where you're constantly filling holes and finding parts, and
The other thing is that when I'm sitting watching really bad TV, Michael's looking at his phone, and he's looking at eBay, and he just sort of oh, let me see what other toy lines I can think of that I haven't thought of in a long time. Oh, look at that. And then you find out that something's really rare, and then you're like, oh, I must have it.
Well, that's one of the reasons why if I don't have anything from a specific toy line, I've been staying away from it. I stay away from that.
So you're not starting a new
I'm not starting a new thing right now. I know that one day I'll have to get to it, but I'm not doing it right now because there's still areas where
Doesn't
I still
that
need...
break the first rule of what we talked about tonight, though? Is like if you come across something...
He's just managing his process here.
Right. There's a lot of coming across for me at this level.
Yeah.
So,
well, plus people are sending you like a snippet, like ideas of like, hey, have you seen this? Like a link to something. Or like, hey, do you – and questions. Hey, do you have this? And so –
And I've never passed up stuff. I don't pass up things anymore that are truly rare and hard to find as long as they're complete and affordable. But a lot of the things I'm passing on that I don't have anything from yet are not things that are, highly desirable. They're not things where I have to worry about them not being around. I know for a fact based on experience that I can let that go a little while longer, And then there are others that are so expensive, like in humanoids that I have nothing from where I'm just like, I'll get to that when I get to it. It's always
like tiger sharks.
Yeah, it's always going to be expensive. Let me focus on this right now. I don't know if any of that's helpful.
I mean, I think that everybody has to kind of go through their own, because everyone collects for a slightly different reason. I mean, some people are collecting on some level. It's about money. Those are the people who are really interested in the AFA grading, and they're doing mint on card, and they're all these kinds of things, and they're usually very anti-repro, and they're kind of strict about a lot of stuff. Those are people who, whether they realize it or not, are kind of doing it for the money. I'm not criticizing them, I'm just saying that's a thing. And for some people, it's a super valid thing. And then you've got people who are just more about like, oh, I just really have these fond memories of this thing, and so I want to collect it and get it, and I want it to be loose because I want to be able to like put it on a shelf and touch it and interact with it. And so that's more of a nostalgia-based collector thing. And I feel like at the core, you probably fall into one of those. And depending on which one of those things you fall into really determines like what your process is going to need to be. Because mint on card collectors are very, very different than loose collectors. Just like modern collectors are very, very different from vintage collectors. And I didn't know any of this until I was like around a lot of different collectors. And the thing is like even if you're just collecting – I shouldn't say just. If you're collecting pop vinyls or if you're collecting whatever you're collecting and you're just really serious about it, you're really into it, and it brings you a lot of joy, honestly, that's all that really matters. It's not like collecting one thing is better than collecting another thing. I think it's just maybe don't be a craphead to other people.
Yeah, just do it for you. Don't look at others and tell them they're doing it wrong,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean... Because there's just there's a lot of judgy people in this hobby is what I'm saying. And I'm sort of half in this hobby and half not. I'm not as big of a just I want to collect all the things. I have a few things that I like to collect, but I can also walk away from a lot of stuff. But I just feel like people get really like recently it's been like the repro thing that comes up, and people are just so adamant about if you support this in any way, then you're a terrible person and you're ruining the hobby for all these other people. And it's just like, some people don't have $80 to buy a little teeny tiny plastic gun to put in their action figure's hand, and they just want to be able to display it in their office to have a fond memory. And so you're basically being an elitist jerkwad by saying that the only way you can get that gun is if you buy the original one.
Right.
And it's like some people have a mortgage and some people have kids and they can't afford an $80 piece of plastic because their wife would divorce them. You know what I mean? Like, so I just feel like there's a lot of things that some people just don't really think about because they're thinking about themselves and they're thinking about their own crap. What do you think, Michael?
I agree. I think when it comes to collecting, sometimes people do lose sight of what's important. I try to make sure that if I'm collecting something I'm not terribly interested in beyond a certain point, I only collect core. I call it core. Core is for example, with Ninja Turtles, core would be the 4 turtles, Splinter, April, and then like the 4 main villains, which would be like Shredder, Krang, Bebop, and Rocksteady. Like, and then maybe like their van, something like that. That's core. For real Ghostbusters, it's the 4 Ghostbusters with their accessories and the car.
Right.
And then maybe Slimer and the Stay Puft guy. Like, that's core. And then depending on needs, you start to branch out. Now, certain toy lines, I find myself staring down the barrel of a much larger core. Mm-hmm. So, like Transformers.
G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe. Well, G.I. Joe, the core shifts depending on what era you grew up in. It's a very contentious thing. But like Transformers, it's undeniable. The ARC crew from '84, the original miniseries, that's the core. Unfortunately, there's a lot of characters. They had a lot of characters. But some people can lose sight of this kind of stuff. And then the next thing you know, they're having to try and get every single thing. And I know for a fact, you've seen it in the news sometimes, where a collector alienates not just his wife and his family, but friends, or they just was a wife that threw away or set a guy's Star Wars collection on fire, and then he killed her for it, like he choked her to death. And so it's just,
I think at that point you're not fighting about what you're really fighting about.
You're not, but it's a bad it's a bad situation all around.
At that point, we need professionals.
Right. It's a bad situation all around. And
I mean, it's weird because I just said all this stuff about like your wife leaving you, but I do find that people aren't always supportive of collectors because it's like, well, I want you as a female, I think this stuff is pointless, so I want you to get rid of all of your stuff.
Right.
Which is ridiculous because it's like, well, okay, why don't you get rid of all of your whatever thing you have a lot of? Like, I don't want to say shoes because that's really sexist, but like I have a lot of shoes. So I'm just trying to speak from a personal, like, or I want you to get rid of all of your many, many cats. Or I want you to get rid of whatever lipsticks that you're hoarding in your drawer up there, because I have like 5,000 of them. Right. It's like, well, no, I spent a lot of money on these because I went to Sephora and blah, blah, blah. So my point is everybody's got a lot of crap probably. And, if it brings you joy on some level, then just, God, don't risk your family's well-being. But at the same time, ladies, come on.
Yeah.
Let your guy have his thing. If he's a musician, let him have his thing. Let him have his toys or his
multiple computers.
His computers that he likes to take apart and put together. Because, honestly, would you rather him be down in the basement, like, doing that stuff? Or would you rather him be going out to, like, strip clubs every night? Right? Right.
You got to find the healthy balance.
You can do both, is what I'm saying. So, all right. Well, that's a nice overview of modern vintage collecting. Michael's thoughts and opinions on all the things.
Kind of a frequently asked questions.
Is there anything else you'd like to know before?
There's a lot of things I'd like to know, but I don't know if that's what we want to talk.
What's your favorite toy?
I think we'll spark a lot of questions from this if folks want to find out more. So.
Right.
Yeah, we could ask you really stupid questions like, what's your favorite toy? And when are you going to do a video about
your favorite toy?
Usually when we ask these kinds of questions or we have like write in, it's usually like people just yelling out. You imagine being in front of an audience and people just start yelling out the names of their favorite cartoon or toy line, like, Ninja Turtles. Like, that's not a question. But I appreciate the enthusiasm. But are you gonna do some Masters of the Universe? Like, people ask a lot.
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Are you gonna do any more of those Star Wars Follies?
Yep. The next Star Wars Follies episode is called Snowblind.
Oh. Sneak peek.
You heard it here first.
That's right. Snowblind.
Snowblind.
Tonight on ABC. Snowblind.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Michael, for coming downstairs. And
appreciate it.
Thanks for coming downstairs.
It was always nice to be here.
Yeah.
In my home.
In my own home.
In your own home.
But before we go,
get out, Aaron.
Maybe people don't know this, but I don't have anything to do with the podcast. Like, it's the RetroBlasting podcast.
That's true.
But I don't have anything to do with it. So it's always, I truly come down here as a guest and do the podcast with the both of you. So it's always nice to.
And we appreciate it.
We do appreciate it.
Yeah, because just in case people are like, man, did you hear the last RetroBlasting podcast where Michael like basically had them interview him? It's like, no, they wanted to interview me. I don't have anything to do with the podcast.
No, we totes came up with this idea earlier. And
we
we
did.
were like, hey,
it was an audible that we called. Sport that.
We were like, hey, let's interview Michael about toy collecting because, you know, you like you said earlier, you hear a lot of things about collecting on podcasts, but it ends up being like, you know, hey, have you found that Jar Jar figure?
No.
I mean, I've been looking for that thing for like 4 weeks. Where'd you end up finding it? And then the guy's like, well, I found it at this one place. You should check out the action on his elbow. It's crazy. It's so crazy, but it's like loose, but it's
but it's
really crazy. And like, I mean, I'm not making fun of them. I mean, you want to be able to go into that level of detail, but sometimes you just kind of want to zoom back a little bit and go, okay, well, what's it like to be a collector? Like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
thank you for that.
no, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
And thank all of you for listening to our podcast. We really appreciate it. And we will see you on the next one. And bye-bye.
And bye.
Say bye, Michael.
Oh, bye.